Today, you'll meet Heather Zeitzwolfe of GetRadBiz.com and owner of Zeitzwolfe Accounting. She's a CPA for creatives and purpose-driven businesses, specifically focused on guiding you toward a reliable, positive cash flow in your business. Her long-standing podcast, now called Get Radical with Your Business, helps content creators monetize by leaning into their own innate profitable superpowers. Heather struggles to define abundance for herself in this episode, so listen in as we pull out pieces of her story that create her own unique definition of abundant living. Heather is a vegan, Gen Xer, cat mom, drag queen enthusiast, and collector of weird dolls and lunchboxes. Heather is unique and eccentric to a T, and that's why I love her. She's genius with numbers and completely weird and truly herself in a sea of straight-laced CPAs. Heather, thanks for being here with me today.
It's an honor to be here with you today. I love hanging out with you. We get to see each other once in a while in person, but this is great to be mic to mic.
Exactly. So today I'm really excited to chat with you because I would love to hear what abundance means to you now versus maybe what it might have meant to you several years back.
Well, this word abundance, it's something that I never even thought about until probably I became an entrepreneur. And that was like a few years ago, maybe 4 years ago. And suddenly I started hearing this word abundance. And so I never even paid attention to that word. I mean, I knew what it was definition wise, but as far as like living your life with abundance, like that never crossed my mind. So what it meant a few years ago, before I knew about this whole terminology, I had no thoughts. But if you want to talk about things like scarcity mindset and all that, I had all of that. I just didn't have a label for it. So these labeling things, it's new to me. But I grew up with, I would definitely say a scarcity mindset because my parents were part of the generation where, they scrimped and saved and, my dad was born in 1919. My mom was born in 1926. So it's like depression, the Great Depression. So growing up with that, it was always like you squirreled things away. You didn't throw things out. You used the same, like refrigerator for years. There's all these things that like you put tape on everything. Like you always tape things together. So I definitely had that kind of a mindset. As far as going into like now thinking about abundance, now my mind has changed and we can talk about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I agree with you. I think outside of the entrepreneurial space, abundance is generally themed toward almost like a religious sense. And I really started to be aware of the concept very much like you during our own personal financial journey. And then that very quickly led into entrepreneurship for me. And now that has been the focus. And so, yes, bring us current with you as far as what your perspective of abundance is now.
Well, I still have a lot of work. The money stories that we've told ourselves or we've heard over the years, the stuff that we play out in our head that, oh my God, I don't have enough money in the bank, all these things, it's like, oh my God, a bill is coming. And I'm an accountant. So like cash flow is like always top of mind for me, right? But I've been trying to have more of an abundance mindset. So I've taken some risks, which I would have never done before, and financial risks. And some have panned out and some haven't. And I have to be okay with that, knowing like the universe is going to bring it back to me. But it is scary when you're like, I'm trying to have an abundance mindset and you're like, I'm putting it out there, but just saying that is not like, it's not just going to bring it to you. Like you hear people saying like, I just said that I wanted to get a new car, but it just came my way. Like, I don't, there's woo woo and all that, but you have to put things into action, right? So it's not just all like like I'm just going to think about it and the money's going to come. That would be nice if that was how it worked, but it doesn't. So, but as far as the abundance mindset, like I took some money risk last year, and I'm now 55. Mm-hmm. When I was 54, I got my first driver's license, like actual license. I had a learner's permit for about 15 years.
Really?
I just kept renewing that. I was very scared about getting my license. I finally got my license, and then I bought a car, and I bought a brand new car, and I paid for it out of pocket.
Wow.
Now, I paid in full out of pocket, not on a credit card. I took the money out of the bank, and granted, I did borrow $15,000 from my husband, but the rest of it is totally paid for. So taking that money out of the bank to pay for something that large, that was like, okay, I'm investing in myself in a safe car, and I know I can make this money back, but it is still terrifying.
Absolutely. So for one, that's interesting. I didn't know that about you. So thank you for sharing that. But so I see this as you investing in like your own independence and freedom. And that's why you now have your own set of wheels and your own license. I think that's super cool. Now, when it comes to making investments in our business, I think it's easy to say, oh, this is going to make me more money, or this is a CPA, they're going to help me save taxes. Like whatever the thing is, it's easy to invest in our business. I think it is harder to invest in something just for ourselves. So talk me through some of the, maybe like an internal argument that you were having with yourself, like the scarcity side versus the abundance side, and why you wanted to make that shift and get your own set of wheels like this.
Yeah. Okay. So investing in myself, I don't actually have a problem with that. Like that's like, that's the one thing I do invest in. I may say like, I'm going to do my own haircut because I'm not going to pay somebody $35 and then have to give them a tip, and all that. It's like, so there's places where I'll scrimp. But then like, there's other things that I was just in San Francisco and I saw this jacket that on Haight and Ashbury that like had this studs and all this stuff. It's adorable. And I was like, oh, I don't even care. I'm just going to buy this thing. So I will invest in things for myself. But as far as like investing in the business, that was something that I had to learn to do. So I kept saying like, I'm bleeding money when I first started my business. Like I was putting money into the business. I kept saying I'm bleeding money. And I had a coach that said, you're not bleeding money, you're investing in your business. And I was like, oh, okay, interesting. And it was like, that shifted for me. I was like, oh, okay. Yeah, that's investing in my business. Because I'm thinking like, oh, I got all these expenses. I got to cut expenses. I'm thinking like an accountant, right? Like you got to cut it down. But investing, like that was just a shift. And then it was like, oh, okay. Now, whether that is a good shift or not, I'm not sure, because I have to say that I have spent a lot of money investing in my business this past year. So I don't know.
Yeah. So give us some tactical examples of if someone feels like they're bleeding money at this point in their business, and that's a concern, put on your CPA hat for a second, which I'm sure is very easy for you to do, and tell us, how do we shift that mindset? How do we go about cutting those expenses or evaluating which expense to cut? Let's shift into this tactical mode for just a second here. Help us out with that.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think a lot of times, I am guilty of this. I will buy things for my business based on emotion. And it's just like a shopper would think, and I've done some things out of FOMO. And I think we have to make sure that we keep that in check. Because that is one thing that when I go to do someone's books or look at their books, do taxes or whatever, you see their spending habits. And it's very interesting to look to see how does this one thing correlate with another? So for instance, I see a lot of people spending money maybe to have a VA. And I'm like, well, what is this VA doing for you? And they're like, oh, well, they're posting all this stuff onto social media for me. I'm like, okay, where are you getting clients from? Oh, from referrals. Okay. So how's the social media like corresponding? Like, is there an alignment with it? Like, maybe it's keeping them top of mind, but sometimes I feel like people think like they have to do all the things and they're paying money to do all of the things that they don't really need to do. So step back and examine like, where does your money go and how is it generating money for you or not generating more money for you? So again, take the FOMO piece out.
Yeah.
and examine, like, every business is different. Just because something works for someone's business doesn't mean that it's going to work for you.
Have you ever pictured yourself having your own show? Maybe it's time. This show is edited and produced by podcastabundance.com. And if you like what we're doing, we can do it for your business too. I'm Virginia Elder, and I've been helping entrepreneurs start podcasts to market their business since 2019. I coach you through branding, structuring your episodes, workflow, and recording your podcast. Then my team and I professionally edit your audio and video so that you don't have to. We'll even write your episode descriptions and titles so that when potential customers turn to Google, your show appears in their search results. Establish authority in your niche, expand your reach, and create a library of helpful content for potential and current clients, all with your own podcast. I'm here to hold your hand and make podcasting the exciting, up-leveling experience it should be, skirting you past the tech and software struggles too. Take the first step by booking a call with me using the link in the show notes or by visiting podcastabundance.com. Now, on to the rest of the show.
Absolutely. And I think usually there is a period of scaling up or whatever with each of those tasks, right? That you can forgive a month or two of, hey, we're getting this initiative rolling and they just started posting, for example, on social media. So I am investing a couple months worth into this VA, but like if in 6 months I haven't gotten a client, then we're going to discuss or something like that. Like set a time bound parameter on it, right? In addition to looking at the dollars and cents. And then, yeah, there's plenty of courses or groups or whatever that I've joined and paid for that I wasn't fully able to commit to and show up to each time. So then that was my job to step back and say, I need to just take this off my plate. Like I either need to commit or pull back, like one or the other. I can't do this halfway committed thing. So that was a way that I was able to evaluate expenses before in the business as well.
Yeah. And, you're talking about 2 months as far as like looking at the social media. The example that I'm thinking of is a client of mine who, before she came to me, she was investing in her business so heavily, but not making any money. And she was spending so much time creating things and doing all those things that she wasn't spending time in doing sales. So she had invested like hundreds of thousands of dollars in this business. And so you have to think about it. Are you trying to have a business or are you just like trying to like do something? And I don't know. You have to look at why you're in business, what it is you're trying to do, and have a plan in place for all the things that you spend money on.
Absolutely. So with that client in mind, and I'm sure you've seen a ton other like that, did you have any specific instructions you gave her about how to spend her time or maybe time blocking to do certain tasks in the business so that you start to generate sales? Do you have any advice around that area?
Yeah, I mean, she had to revamp everything because when you operate a business, quote unquote, that is losing money every single year, when you go to do your taxes, the IRS is going to be like, is this a business or is this a hobby? And in her case, it was kind of like a glorified hobby, and so if you are going to run a business, you got to like run it like a business. So now she's on the right track. So things are good for her, but make sure that hopefully people are looking at their numbers. We're talking about abundance, right? We want to make sure that we are looking at our numbers. Sometimes I think that might be the scary part for people, is to look at it and they're like, if I don't look at it, then maybe they feel more abundant. I'm not sure, but I think I'm doing okay. I'm not sure.
Yeah. Yeah. So, for example, I this year have set guardrails, shall we say, around myself, where every work morning I hop in here and I do what I consider to be sales activities first thing in the morning. So whether that is following up on emails, messaging people, following up with connections from events that I attended, whatever that is to create conversations and intentionally start to do those sales activities. And I think, so we're talking about two terms that I think give people sometimes the heebie-jeebies: sales and numbers, right? Money specifically. And like you said, maybe for some people, they think if they ignore the numbers, it's easier for them or whatever. But I would argue that that is by far more of a scarcity mindset that's playing out in their life by ignoring those numbers. Because I think when you really kind of have the guts to dive in and figure out where the money is going, where the sales are coming from, which activities it makes sense for you to invest in, then you're able to lean into those pieces. Like you said, like if posting on social media isn't building a client base for you, then why are we doing that? Is it because existing clients tag along on social media? So they're staying, so it's like a longevity play for your business. Like, what is the purpose there? I think that's really important. So I would love for you to share, Heather, what you have shifted in your business that helps you feel more abundant as a business owner.
Well, I have to work on this every day, I have to say. I mean, it really is a difficult thing. I think that abundance doesn't necessarily always mean money, though. I think as a business owner, besides money, I mean, that's important, right? We have to make money in our business. But there are other ways that we can be abundant besides the bottom line. So, you know, when I gave the example of the woman who wasn't making much money, you know, she was having a lot of fun. So we can have fun in our business. That is part of it. We're entrepreneurs. We want to have fun, but we have to make money. So looking at that, my numbers like every day, sometimes like, you know, if you got enough in the bank, you might feel like I'm comfortable. I can relax. I don't need to do sales calls and all of that. I'm guilty of that sometimes because we don't like sales, right? And then, but we can't get too comfortable. Like that's a problem too. So going back to the abundant thing, again, it's a difficult thing for me. I'm just being honest because I'm like, you know, I grew up with scarcity, but the abundance shows up in different ways. So besides just like making money and I'm able to travel, I'm able to buy things, and I don't have kids, so I don't need to worry about that. So you were talking about like, but I've met so many people through my business. To me, that's a part of the abundance is like, I've probably connected with more people now in my 50s when I started my business than ever in my life. Like I've gotten really, really close to people. And a lot of that is actually through podcasting. So that's like opened up all kinds of doors for me through podcasting. So yeah, the abundance mindset, I'm sorry to give you a wishy-washy answer on that, but it is something that I'm working on, but I feel like, I don't mean to be like doom and gloom, but I live in Portland, Oregon. There are a lot of people living out on the streets, and there's a lot of homeless here, and the rent has gone up. I mean, so I feel abundant in the fact that my husband and I invested in a home. Our mortgage is almost paid off. We have a roof over our head. I've got food in the refrigerator. I got no complaints. You know, it's like, to me, that's like abundance. I guess if you gave it, you know, to me, that's what it is. Yeah, I mean, I live a life that I feel is, in some ways, I guess you'd call it privileged, you know, but, you know, at the same time, I like to fight for our rights and do all those kind of things too. So, so I see that there are things that are inequalities in the world that I want to help fight against. And yeah, so yeah, no complaints, Virginia.
Yeah. So I love this though, because you're highlighting the fact that abundance means different things to different people. So what I'm hearing through your answers is that to you, abundance is, like you said, having the roof over your head, having everything that you need in your house, being very comfortable in your home and having those things, but then also having the freedom to speak out on causes that you believe in, fight for justice in different ways that you believe in. And those things are really hard to do if you're worried about safety or having a roof over your head or having enough money in the bank or whatever. So it's like you have worked really hard to check the basic boxes that you feel are very important. And then now you have the time and the freedom to focus on other bigger issues that are near and dear to your heart or that will make a change. And so you didn't say it, so I'm going to say it for you. That is your definition of abundance, is having those freedoms to be able to do these passions in your life.
And travel, that, I can travel, and all those things are important to me. Yeah.
To some people, abundance might be having a fat retirement account or having XYZ in your brokerage account or all of those kind of monetary check boxes, right? But in this...
Well, okay, so on that side, though, I would say that I'm happy to say that, my FICO score is, super high. People are always people look at that and they're like, oh, my God, I've never seen one that high before. So I'm very proud of that.
There you go.
And if it goes down a point, I'm like, what the heck happened? So I'm very mindful around, paying off credit cards. I do like to get the points, so I'm not anti-credit card. If you can pay it off. And, sometimes it's good to, if you can get 0% interest and, if that's the time to, buy something in your business, and as long as you pay it off on time. So, that's part of abundance too, FICO scores.
And you also mentioned relationships, and that having a podcast has really enhanced the relationships that you have in your life. And I agree with you 100%. It helps give us a platform that we can reach out to people and have them on the show, and we get to have a conversation we probably wouldn't have had otherwise. So talk to me a little bit about how you've grown as a person since having a podcast.
Yeah, it has literally changed my life. So I look back, it's funny how you can look at the little, the dots that brought you to different places, and you're like, wow, follow those dots, and you're like, man, if I hadn't done this one podcast interview, all these other things that followed would not have happened. I don't do it for the downloads, I'll just admit. I do it for meeting people, putting out my own message for those who want to hear it, supporting my clients that listen to it, and opening up doors. Like you said, you can invite people onto your podcast and talk to them. Some of these people charge a lot of money normally as coaches, and you get to talk to them for free and pick their brain, and they're happy to do it. And it's crazy. Sometimes you'll have somebody contact you and you're like, whoa, you want to be on my podcast? Okay. And so it's so much fun to meet people and having this deep conversation. Like you said, it's when else do you get to do this? Maybe if you go out to dinner with somebody, not a somewhat stranger, and I've made so many deep friendships through it. So podcasting comes in different flavors, right? We can do a video podcast, we can do audio, we can go on social media together and then turn that into a podcast. There's so many different ways, and it's such a great excuse to talk to somebody. So I've made clients from it, I've made friends from it, I've made referral partners. I mean, it's just so many different benefits from it. And it's opened up doors for speaking engagements. And I met my coach. She was on my show, and my whole life has changed from that one interview. I mean, it's just mind-boggling.
Wow.
How it changed my life. Podcasting is it can be a lot of work, but with you, Virginia, you're doing the heavy lifting part of
That's
it.
That's right.
Which can cause people sometimes to have pod fade if they have to do all that stuff. So I was trying to, in the beginning, trying to do all the things, and then I was like, okay, I got to hand this off to somebody else because, we have to again, this is another part of that thing. It may be fun to do the editing and all that, but we need to be concentrating on what makes us money in our business, right? So it's always better to have somebody else work on that stuff for you. So as much as I enjoy editing and all those types of things, I've had to hand that off myself. So doors opening all over the place.
Yeah, I love that. So you talked about, you've established referral partners, you've gotten clients from your show, all of these opportunities as far as relationships and connection, which is also something you mentioned earlier when we were talking about your perspective on abundance. So I would venture to slide that into your definition as well, that you value connections and relationships, and your idea of abundance includes that piece.
Yeah, because we are human beings and we're selling to each other, networking and all of that stuff. And to me, the human connection is the most important because, you can, you can try to sell things online, but unless they feel like they know you, and in a podcast, they can get to know you without actually talking to you first. So we have some kind of influence with them. But that human connection is so important. That's why I think like AI is, knock on wood, is never going to take over for humans, because humans want human connection, or at least I think so, except for the ones that are dating AI. I don't know. I don't understand that at all, but
that's funny. So tell me more about what it was like as you started your podcast. You have a business, you're a business owner, you're thinking, okay, I need to get the word out about my business. Talk to me about that thought process and how you started. Was it super intentional, or were you kind of willy-nilly with your podcast topics at first? Or talk to me about, like, let's say, launch to episode 20, like super early in your show. What was that like for you?
Okay. Well, I had a coach that was, she told me, you should be on podcasts. And so I was like, okay, well, I don't know any podcasts. To me, it was like podcasts were like Pat Flynn, John Lee Dumas. Like, it just seemed like there was like, oh my God, all these, it just seemed like impossible. Mm-hmm. Right. So then I got some guest appearances on some podcasts, and mainly it was like things where they were like, hey, we'll coach you, or that sort of thing. And so it kind of got my feet wet in it. I was like, oh, okay, this is pretty cool. I get to hear myself in a podcasting app. How cool is that? So then she got my wheels turning, and I was like, okay, I'll start a podcast. But I'm like, who am I going to interview? So I knew I wanted to work with creative entrepreneurs. So I just kind of went through my mental Rolodex of people that I knew, and I was like, who can I talk to? And so I set up a few different interviews, and I took a podcast appearance that I was on, and I just used that and kind of edited that as my first one. And then I interviewed a person I knew from Toastmasters who works with people doing TED Talks now. And then another person I found just by posting something on Facebook. And so then I had 3 that I was going to roll out at the same time. So I knew that you had to put out 3.
Yeah.
So I did that. Yes. And then, I was working on the artwork, and, and doing that kind of stuff, like, oh, what are my colors going to be? And all of that, like, oh, how do I host it? And so, you learn all these things. There's we forget how many things there's to know when you first launch a podcast. And so, again, if you're thinking about launching a podcast, if you don't want to have to go down that rabbit hole, Virginia is probably your person.
You're too sweet, Heather. Thank you. Yes.
Well, because there are so many things. Unless you feel like you want to dig into okay, what do I need for, it could even be the recording equipment to how do you upload this stuff? How do you post it? Do I write a blog? How do I do show notes? There's so many different things.
Yeah, there could be 50 moving parts. Seriously. I've listed them all out, and there are over 30 moving parts to a launch.
And so then I was like, okay, but then you have to think ahead. Okay, this is my calendar. I want to release one of these each week. So then it's who else do I know? Who can I interview? And then suddenly I'm people are contacting me, and I'm whoa, wait a minute. What am I supposed to do with this information? And I'm okay, I need a spreadsheet. So I use Notion, which is one of my favorite tools. And I built this database within a database. So I'm very proud of this. I'll have to share this with you, Virginia.
Okay.
So I had every show. So, and then when you click on it, it would open up this own page. So every show had its own page. So I would keep the artwork there, the links for the show notes, notes for like what I was going to ask them, the research that I did on them, maybe their intro. Like I had everything all in one spot. And then then when I had a VA help me, I could put the transcript in there for them to clean up, and then they could make the show notes and write the description, and then we could have the link to the blog post. Like it was all central in one location. Yeah. So, but at first I thought like, oh yeah, I could just do this on my hard drive. No. You want to get organized as quickly as possible, because as soon as you start like realizing like, oh, I can't just be like week to week on this. Like I have to think about the future and like plan out, okay, what's going to be episode 20, 21, 22, like think ahead. So I was starting to book people and like put in the dates, when I was going to interview them, when I could release it. And then like you also have to like have a buffer because people cancel or they move. And then you learn these things like, oh my God, I can't, I can't be like working 2 weeks ahead. And then the VA can't edit my podcast. She's sick. And what am I going to do? And I started my podcast actually when my mother was in hospice and I was helping take care of her. And so I was going over to her house three days a week, and I didn't have my microphone and stuff. And so there were times where sometimes I'd be editing the podcast there, if I didn't, this was before I had an editor. And then I'd hear the sound and I'm like, oh my God, wait a minute, you can't hear me. And I'm like trying to like re-record something on my laptop. And yeah, so, do it ugly, right? So you have to, sometimes in the beginning you make mistakes, rookie mistakes like that. And so, yeah, it's a huge learning curve in the beginning for sure. So having help really, and then once you start meeting podcasters and like talking to them, like it's one thing to interview people, but then when you interview a podcaster, they can give you tips. So like I was interviewing people in Zoom on one sound file, and then till I interviewed somebody that was a podcaster, and they said, oh, you can click to have multiple tracks in Zoom, so you can edit each track. And I'm like, oh my God, you just like blew my mind. So
yeah. Well, and that's where now technology has advanced again, and there's other platforms like we're recording on Riverside because it is even more clean and better sounding than Zoom. So it's like you gotta not just roll with the punches like you do with your business, but you have to keep up with all the tech and roll forward with it. And I think that's the other valuable, often unmentioned piece of having someone help you with your podcast is that you're suddenly not in charge of knowing what's going on in the podcasting industry. You can have someone else helping you with that. So yeah, thank you so much. All of that you shared is so valuable because it really can be overwhelming. And I think as fast as the excitement wears off about starting this new thing and thinking about how visible you're going to be with your new show, the overwhelm wave comes just as quickly with all of those moving parts. So I appreciate you sharing that and just kind of like giving all the podcast editors and managers like a little party dance to do out there because we do a lot of work.
You do a lot of work, and you especially know it when you have to do it yourself, and it's just too much. It is. Way too much. I mean, it is like having a second job.
It is.
So if you're, it's one thing to get on the mic and talk and all that, and then that's the fun part of it. I mean, I like to edit and all that, so don't get me wrong. But like when you start to think about your own business, this is not a hobby. You're doing this for your business. It's like, it's better for somebody else to work on it because, yeah, we should be working on our serious things. It's just like, I do people's taxes. They don't want to do their taxes. It's like, that's not a fun thing to do. I find it kind of fun, but
Well, I agree. So I have an accounting background as well. So I did our family books and taxes for years. And gosh, I can't remember if it was last year or the year before, but I finally got to the point where I was like, yes, I can still do this. Yes, things are getting more complicated. I don't want to do this anymore. I don't have the bandwidth to keep up with new tax laws and new ways to file. And should we use TurboTax or should we use something else? I'm tired of making those decisions. And so while I could, it's just so much more valuable for me to hand that off to you or some other qualified CPA just to be able to free up your own time. So with that shift, I think outsourcing is so important for any of these little, bookkeeping, accounting, managing your podcast. There's a million things in your business that you could probably hand off. How would you advise a client per se to make that decision? Like, what are the gives and takes of, should I outsource this thing? How do I know when to outsource this thing? If I'm looking at finances, right? If I'm looking at my business books, is there a sign? How do we know?
It's so funny. People spend so much money on things like the social media. They'll spend so much money on marketers and all that kind of stuff. And again, like, is it really bringing you business where they're not looking at their finances at all? So to me, I think that is one of the best investments. Now, I'm not just saying that because I offer bookkeeping, tax, and advising, but it is, we're here to make money, right? Shouldn't that be like our focus? So we should be looking at that type of stuff. As far as like, when can you outsource, I would look at like, okay, what are you trying to accomplish, and how much are you willing to spend to take care of this? What is the outcome that you're trying to achieve? And then you got to look at the numbers. Like, you have to understand what your numbers are to even know, can you make those decisions? So, I like to put money aside if I'm thinking like I want to invest in this, and it's like, okay, can I take this money out of my business each month? Does that make sense? And just kind of put it aside. And then before you hire a contractor or an employee, then now you've got that bucket of money sitting aside that you know that you can take out of your bank account and it's not hurting your business. And then now you've got a little chunk there that you can pay people. And so, always kind of put money aside for that. I think ahead. I like to have emergency funds. I like to have, little buckets of things for what you want to spend money on in the future, like if you're going to buy assets or something. But so start setting money aside. Also look at how's that going to change your business? So will that bring in more sales? What does that mean? Do you have capacity for taking on more clients? Do you need to hire somebody to help you with that capacity? So there's different types of hiring in your business, right? There's the people that are going to do work that generates revenue. And then the other stuff that kind of is more like the marketing stuff that brings in people into your world. So, we have to have a happy balance, right? We have to have leads coming into our business, but we also have to be able to sell and then serve. So, we have to make sure that we have all the parts. So, it's difficult, but you have to start with just looking at your numbers and making sure that it pans out and it makes sense.
Yeah, I love that. So do you remember what the journey was like to getting your first client from your podcast? Or do you remember how long it took or any of those type of details?
I think it was probably a couple of months, something like that. Mm-hmm. But, it's interesting because those things again, you have to follow the dots, right? So it's not necessarily I called you up because I heard this podcast episode. It's not like that. It's these little things where it's somebody leaves something on social media and then there's a comment here and then there's something in the DM and all those different things. And, I like to say that I track where all of my clients come from, mm-hmm. but sometimes it's a long winding road. It takes a little time. Yeah. And oftentimes with financial type stuff, people don't want to make that decision right away, or they're like, oh, I don't need to spend money on that until they get into a situation and they're like, oh my God, I better do something about this. So yeah, it can be a long and winding road, but it is always good to ask people how they found you. And, but again, a lot of it is just from this, influence over time. So, I think it was probably a few months into it.
I think that's a testament to the fact that people need over 7 quote unquote touches before they actually jump in and spend money with you. So whether that is your podcast, just realize that it's not just this single lane, flat, what do you call it? Like a one-dimensional type of avenue as far as marketing your business. It is important to be in several places at once, whether that is the podcast and a blog, or the podcast and your conferencing, or whatever you're doing. Some people, I think, are trying to jump straight out the gate and do all the things all at once, and that definitely leads to overwhelm. But what I've found is helpful is if you just add one new endeavor every year or every 6 months, so that it's this slow build to visibility. And then with that being said, kind of like how you were talking about earlier, how it's like, okay, you have to have leads coming in, but you also have time to do the work. And then you also need time to like follow up, wrap up, end the client experience on a good note. So you've got these 3 different levels. It's the same thing with marketing. You've got to focus a large part of your efforts on long-term pieces that live forever, like podcasts, YouTube videos, blogs, site content, and then a smaller portion of your time on stuff that expires quickly, like social media posts, stories, lives, all of those things. So it's like, really, we can't just focus on one piece of our business, can't focus on one piece of your marketing endeavor.
Well, a podcast, so one of the great things about a podcast is that you can repurpose things. Yes. So, a podcast, you can if you're in business, you're like, what do I post about? Like, I don't even know, right? But a podcast will help you actually get streamlined and think about things like, oh, okay, maybe I want to do a 4-part segment on this topic. And then now it gives you oh, okay, this is what I'm going to talk about when I go online. And then you could take the podcast and it's like, now you've got all kinds of content that you can use in various ways. And you can make a download. There's just it gives you a blog. Otherwise it's like, you're like, I don't know what I'm going to post about. And then you're paying this other social media person to come up with things that maybe doesn't feel genuine to you. But this podcast is so many ways you can repurpose it. And then the other thing is just the validation of if you have a podcast where if someone is referred to you, they can look online and see, they may see your social media posts, but there's, it's like, oh, you write a book, you're a speaker, you're on a podcast. That gives you a level of authority. So I think that is a great way, for people to check you out and be like, do I want to work with this person or not? I always check people's podcasts.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great method. And I'm the same way as far as clicking through their links and checking out their website and checking all their social media platforms. I'm always, before I'm going to do business with someone or even invite them to an event with me or something, I am looking to see, maybe it is or isn't a true gauge of how serious they are about business, but that's kind of what I'm looking for. And I think potential clients are probably looking at podcasts in that very same lens of, does this person align with my values? How serious are they about business? Does some of what they say resonate with me, or am I completely turned off by their voice? Or what is it, right? So you mentioned repurposing. Can you share a little bit about how you repurpose your podcast, or how you have, for your business or for other platforms?
Yeah, so right now we're recording in video, so it doesn't have to be an audio podcast. We can take these, we can put them on YouTube, we can put it on Instagram, TikTok, anything like that. We take segments from it. You could even send it out in a newsletter. If you've got a newsletter, you could send either the whole podcast or sections of it. You can chop it up and then have it on YouTube, where you can have if we talked about certain things like abundance and you just want to make a short video about abundance, you can do it that way. Then you can take the transcript. This is one of my favorite things. Take this transcript and then put it into a chat GPT or something like that and say make a blog post out of this or something, and now it can take your whole conversation and then turn it into a non-conversation blog post about that topic. So, with a little finessing, it doesn't just do it automatically.
Yeah, you got to edit just a little bit.
Yeah. But now you can have social posts. A lot of this stuff can be Evergreen, so you can put it on your website. There's so many ways that you can use it. It's one of the best things that you can do is like a podcast, because it does give you so many different variations that you can use with it. And also you're collaborating with somebody. So now they're going to, not always, but when you do collaborate with somebody, then they can put it on their feed. Other people see it, opens up, more eyeballs on you. Mm-hmm. So it expands your network. Yeah. So, that is like one of the best things for me, right? It's expanded my network.
Yeah. And that goes back to your values of relationships. Yep.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So as we start to wrap up, tell me maybe some upcoming moves or some things that you're excited about, maybe some goals in your personal life or in your business that are going to ease you toward abundance this year.
Ooh, yes. So I'm sort of changing some of my focus. I'm rolling out more CFO type services. So this is like an area where I want to help people on a higher level.
Yeah.
So a part of it is like a shift. So it's like, okay, now I'm going to be talking to, businesses that are, I mainly work with solopreneurs, but this is going to be working with bigger businesses. So it's like that shift of like, okay, I'm going to take on these different types of clients. So it's, sometimes it can be scary, right? When people have imposter syndrome and I'm like, I got this, I got to just like think through it. It's like, okay, there's people out there that will buy this. I have to put my faith in that. Mm-hmm. And there's that. And then speaking is one of my things that I've put on my calendar this year. Focus, CFO, and speaking. So I'm looking for speaking engagements and putting myself out there and, applying for things and not feeling like, oh, if they say no, it's like the end of the world. Yeah. Like, it's okay. There's more speaking opportunities that are out there. So knowing that, this is another big thing, Virginia. I'm not always going to be the right flavor for somebody. Obviously, and getting rejected or whatever, that's just part of it. Like, and you said like, well, we listen to podcasts to see who might be a right fit. Mm-hmm. Like, there's people out there that are very bro-y. Like, that is not me at all. Like, that's not a right fit for me. Yeah. So we're not going to be everybody's flavor, and I'm okay with that, so.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and that speaks to leading with your authentic self, right? Like if you want a CPA with purple and blue or green hair, then Heather's your gal, and you could tell even from this episode, you are different from the average CPA that someone might picture in their mind. And you mentioned like you work with creatives. That makes sense because you're a creative. So
right.
You're with any service for any of us, we're always looking for someone who aligns with who we are and who we want to work with. So
exactly.
Someone who's creative, who also has pink hair, may not want a CPA who's this like stiff collar, navy blue suit jacket, crew cut type of guy, right?
Right. Right.
So that's the beauty of us getting to be truly who we are. And I tell clients this all the time. There are no rules when it comes to your business and your podcast. You get to be who you want, do what you want, do episodes as often as you want. You get questions about like, well, what's the ideal length of an episode, or how often should my episode go up? And I'm like, there's no rules. Let's design something around what you want to do. So I think you've done a really good job of doing that for yourself.
Thank you. So, when I first started my business, I was afraid to like show my like real self, and I wore like a suit when I'd meet with clients and stuff. And then I had a client say to me like, oh, wow, I had no idea that you had pink hair, because we had been communicating through phone. And then she saw me on Zoom, and she's like, oh my God, had I known what you look like, I wouldn't have been afraid to talk to you every time. And I was like, and she's a marketer, and she's like, you need to double down on like what you look like. And I'm like, really? And so I had to, the feeling of abundance, right? I was like, I had to embrace who I was and be like, okay with it. And like, okay, I'm confident that this is still going to bring me business. And it did. And it aligned so much better. The people I was attracting were so much more aligned with who I was. And so that was one of the best things that, I don't need to hide behind a suit.
Yeah.
So sorry, you were going to ask me a
No,
question.
that's perfect. Because I do think so often that you'll look at somebody else's business and say, okay, well, that's how this is done, especially if you're looking at like a big player in your industry. Okay, well, this is how they do business, so this is how I'm supposed to. Or a podcast, oh, well, all these other people do weekly shows. I guess I have to do a weekly show. Or interviews. I guess I have to do interviews. No, you don't. Do what you want, and you're going to attract more people just by being you and being weird, shall we say it, right? And enjoy that and allow your business to be fun for yourself. I love that you've done such a good job at that.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Well, Heather, tell us where we can find you, where we can see all your cool hairstyles, and of course, where we can keep up with your work in your business.
Thank you. Okay, so my last name is Zeitzwolfe, and I have a business called Zeitzwolfe Accounting, which is hard to spell. So I now have a URL, getradbiz.com.
All
so
right.
You can find me at getradbiz.com. That's way easier. And if you want to set up, a discovery call with me, chat with me, whatever, do that. There's links on that website. You can find me on Instagram at getradbiz. And, you can look me up on LinkedIn, Heather Zeitzwolfe, if you can spell it.
And then what about your podcast?
So my podcast is called Get Radical with Your Business. It used to be called Get the Balance Right, but people thought it was about yoga, and so I had to change that. So naming your podcast is a very important thing. But right now, I'm probably going to be doing more lives for a little while, and I'm going to be changing up some things. So if people want to go live with me, let me know, because I'm always looking for people to go live with.
Yeah. And do you do lives on Instagram or Facebook? Where are you going live?
Facebook. Although I will do it on Instagram. It's always fun to do that. It just seems like sometimes the software can be kind of glitchy.
Yeah. And I know YouTube offers a live option as well. So that's why I wanted to check.
I'll do whatever, as long as it aligns with,
As long as you get to show up as yourself.
Yeah, exactly.
Thank you so much for this conversation today, Heather. I think this was a great episode for anyone who maybe struggles with defining abundance for themselves, because I think you may have, but then through our conversation, we were able to pick out little pieces of like, oh, this is important to you. This is important to you. And I think that's important for people to hear, that not everyone has this super clear path of where they're going. They're like, well, this didn't feel good, but now this feels better. So I'm going to travel this way, right? So I appreciate you just being open and sharing that.
Well, Virginia, you are obviously the abundance whisperer, because you brought it out of me.
Thank you. I love that. Thank you for being here today.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely.